I love that sound. All right. All right. So we are in the CIS Controls Mastery course for MSP, our second Ask Me Anything. And we've got a star-studded group today. As always, we've got John Strand, the author of the course. John, thanks for joining. We've got Curt Dukes, EVP of CIS with us. So for those of you that may have questions around, things that are CIS specific, whether that's about how CIS views a specific control or about accreditation, right? We've got Curt here.
All right, I'm joining
Well, thank you, Lan.
sorry.
No problem.
Welcome, Lan.
None of us have ever done that before.
No,
so.
yeah. No problem. And then we've got Matt with us, Matt Lee, who I think everybody knows from PAX 8. Is it Matt, Director of Compliance and Security now? Director, or do I have the...
We made it up, but Senior Director of Security and Compliance.
There you go.
Ooh, you added senior since last
I
time.
wanted to be a little
Well
older,
done.
John. I felt like the
like
gray
it.
hair had to be adequately represented.
Gotta
I'm
get
not
that,
Curtis
yeah.
there, but I'm almost there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we're both jealous of Kurt's hair.
Curt got way more hair than me. I'm really
right.
of it.
So,
and then so Matt, you've done just inordinate amount of work. You've trained people on the controls. You've mapped like just about every product to the controls, and you guys at PAX 8 have done a really nice job mapping controls in your marketplace. So awesome having you here sharing perspective. And then we brought in Eric Woodard, CEO of Protek and MSP out of Utah, who Eric, I got mad props for you. You've really, from somebody that's gone through literally being compromised as an MSP and are your customers many years ago to really becoming an MSP thought leader, and what you've done and building continually a really awesome business. Congrats on that. So
thanks. I'll give you that $20 later.
yeah. Zelle is fine.
we get paid.
So we wanted to do something a little different that again is in the course, but we're going to start off today in this AMA with a little bit of a interview with Eric, and I'm going to get some more people in here. This is kind of the way we did things in the course, right? And what we're going to set the stage in is, where we start, and that is, I think, Eric, people would say probably some of the hardest controls are 1 and 2, and certainly 3. But I'm going to kind of tee up you and John here a little bit, right? We know we can't protect what we don't know. But one of the things, aside from it being challenging to a large degree to get people's inventory, right? Hardware, software, and now we've got SaaS on top of it, data, etc. Wanted to kind of like have you unpack a little bit how you look at it, but then let you, John, and maybe Matt talk a little bit, and certainly Curt chime in shared responsibility, because that's something that I think you've done a masterful job on. I think people can learn a ton of this, and maybe even throw some nuances there, how you look at your MSAs in relationship to shared responsibility, because this is an area where I think a lot of MSPs are too lax, for lack of a better word, Eric. Hey, we patch, right? And that we do this and lack of specificity can really get you in trouble in a bad situation, situation. So good framing it up there for you, Eric?
Sure.
I think you did.
Good. Mr. Strand, you want to add anything as we
Yeah, I want to add, I really want to add to like what we're kind of setting up before Eric starts talking is you don't have to boil the ocean alone, right? There are absolutely some things that your customers have to take responsibility for, and you can delineate those lines, and you can make it very clear that there are things that it's not that you don't want to do them, it's just you cannot do them at all. And I think if you set that up front, I think it kind of reduces your liability as an MSP, MSSP, And I think it establishes kind of like good fences make good neighbors. If it establishes that relationship up front with your customers, I think just having some of these conversations are powerful conversations to have that can help you build trust in the long run in a way that a lot of MSPs that try to enter this space and, you know, they're just going after being the cheapest that they possibly can makes a big difference. We just had a pen test that we just completed actually with a credit union out in New Jersey, and we were not the cheapest firm, like at all. And when we started working with this firm, I think that their CTO told me, your team is really annoying. They are asking a lot of questions. And that's not something anybody that's an owner of a company wants to hear. But at the end of the engagement, they said, we got way more out of this engagement than we'd gotten over the past 3-4 years. The value was just so much higher. And he said, I realized at the end of it, your team was asking questions because they genuinely cared about us and they weren't trying to get through the contract as fast as they possibly could. So establishing these relationships, especially in the way that Eric talks about it, is I think incredibly important for not just getting new customers, but keeping them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe framing it out, Eric, maybe talk about, so, you know, I think again, everybody would say 1 and 2 are challenging to say the least. How do you even start, you know, knowing that, you know, if it not all, you know, like, you know, we think RMM or we think our network monitoring solution and, oh, we're going to get our inventory and
Right.
not the case.
You know, so I'm going to take this a different direction than I have in the past. And
Yeah.
if I was starting right now, I actually would start with Matt Lee's, we call it the bubble diagram. He did a thing, and I'll let you give it the justice it deserves, but it's bubbles. It's each control or safeguard, and it's broken into little bubbles that make it so tangible, so easy to understand for non-technical people. So if I was starting right now, that's where I would start. Like I got a deeper understanding of the controls after going through his bubbles. So that's where I would start. And this was not rehearsed or, you know, Matt makes big money off this because he gives it away for free. But, you know, that's where I would start at this point. Yeah, there's the bubbles, right?
Yep.
And the thing that's magical about this, and the controls are funny things. Like you read it, you're like, yep, I got it. And then you get down to 16.2, you read it again, you're like, wait a minute, now I understand 1.2 a little differently.
Sure.
Right. And so you kind of like, you understand them more as you kind of go through it. So, you know, I'm going way back in time here. It used to be the top 20 controls, and then they did a study on the top 6. And so I always tell MSPs, start at the top 5 or 6 and get them kind of figured out and then keep moving down the road. I'll tell you, the first 6 are some of the hardest for MSPs, in my opinion. The 7 through like 14, 15, that's the stuff we've been doing forever. We got that stuff figured out. Like, oh, malware, you know, DNS filtering, like some of that stuff we have a little more dialed in and it starts going faster. But those first 3 are a bear because they're all inventory, right? They're hardware inventory, software inventory, data inventory. And so they are hygiene. There's an indirect relationship to security, but it's not like I'm hardening something or I'm doing something. I'm just seeing what the heck is out there. And that's why those are so challenging. And MSPs, you know, based on their maturity level, not their size so much, they may have different levels of control of that. You know, I know MSPs that they're not even sure if they have RMN on everything. And I know some MSPs that, like the naming convention, if it's not checked in for 2 weeks, they're learning all these other things. So it's kind of the other extreme, right? So, yeah, so if I was going to start again, Matt's bubble diagram, I'll let Matt talk about that. Inventory, and you're going to have to dedicate some time and resources to people to do the inventory. It's not a fast, quick, let me buy a tool and it just is done. You need inventory. You get, yeah, certainly you get some of that from your RMM. You're going to have to scan the network. You're going to have to inventory the firewalls, the UPSs, the everything they got, the cloud apps. Then we go into software, all install software, and then we go into cloud apps, and you have to have a tool to catch all those cloud apps out there. And then probably one of the most difficult is that data, right? So that's where I would start.
And I kind of want to springboard off that and then kick it over to Matt because I'd like him to talk about his bubble sheets some more. But like, it's really interesting to me, like you mentioned, Eric, a lot of people just reach for a tool, right? And I think a lot of organizations have a number of tools. If they just have the processes in place, they can actually get a tremendous amount of value and get really far down that line, because you're never going to be 100% with 1 and 2.
Nope.
Ever. It's not going to happen. But if you're looking for quick wins, vulnerability management, that's an inventory. It's a type of inventory. Is it 100%? Absolutely not. And even if you go into like audit log management, if you're setting up and you're running Sysmon on your systems, you are inventorying the software that's running in your environment with Event ID 1 with Sysmon. So there's a lot of these things that we talk about, how the controls don't necessarily exist as these siloed entities. There's a tremendous amount of bleed and overlap between these different things that they can help and support each other. And it's really hard. It's really hard to enter this cold and not even know what any of these things are. And most of my life, when I've been doing auditing for the critical controls, people are like, man, we've got nothing for this. And I'll start asking, well, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? I'm like, yeah, we do. Great. Then you're over 80% of the way there. You just got to get it logged. You've got to get reporting, and you got to get a learning around it, which of course is a lot of work, right? Pareto principle, but you can do that. So Matt, can you talk a little bit more about your bubble sheet? You threw it up for a couple of seconds.
Yeah,
and then
I'll
you
toss
brought
it back
down.
up. So there's a couple things I want to bring up here when it comes to being successful at CIS. The first is, John, you nailed it. I have an exercise called the what, the how, the tool, and the proof. Basically, it goes through, what is this safeguard asking me? How am I going to accomplish that? And also, what are those sub-whats? Like, oh, accounts, which accounts? Local admin accounts, domain accounts, SaaS accounts, accounts to firewalls, accounts to like all those sub-whats. And then the how, and then the tool, to your point, because the tool would only come last. And you ask, do I already have something for this? And then can I prove I'm doing it? Those are those pieces. And I bring those up because that leads into what these bubble diagrams are. I also don't want to take away from who actually made this. This is a collaborative project with CIS. Curt, your team loaned me 2 executives for a few hundred hours at least each to go through and really ask, what is this safeguard really asking? What does it mean? And the intention was to try to break this down into the elements that mean something in this safeguard. Right? So in this case, in 6.3, the 2 in the middle here are the distilled what, the one what they're asking me for. MFA on all externally exposed applications. That's the green boxes in the middle. But the colors and the shapes all mean things. Like to your point of interrelatedness, John, if I say I have to have MFA on all external applications, I have to send a parameter, that's what that line going to the left is to 4.1, to say I'm going to configure that application when I get it in my configuration methodologies in 4.1. I have to say set MFA up, right? And do that piece. And then, but also when I'm doing this and I say I need to know what applications I have to read from 2.1. So that dotted line is a data flow heading into this control, saying I need to read all my software, see if it needs MFA, set it up and configure it in 4.1. Does that make sense how they're interrelated? And to your point, as you go through these safeguards, some of them are like the hero SKUs, right? What I mean by that is they're those ones that are like, you literally have to do this well or you will fail completely. An example of that is 4.1 and 4.2. Look how many other safeguards are interrelated to this, right? 3.11, encrypt sensitive data. I've got to set that up. 3.13, deploy data loss. I have to set that up. 4.3, configure automatic session. I have to configure that. I have to, right? So as you say, as you build in these controls, John, and I don't want to make this seem overwhelming, but these guides help you literally just put them up there and cross off. Yep. X, I've done access control. I've done modification. I've done disposal. Right, so you can use these visuals to Eric's point as a way to like see all of the components and subcomponents of a safeguard. The yellow triangle or trapezoids or parallelograms, I guess. I don't know.
Let's go parallelograms.
Rhombus.
I'm going to go
Would
with
it be a rhombi?
Got to be a
Anyways.
parallelogram.
But the point is, these green and yellows make up the whats. Why did we do this? I wanted to have a scientific way or a scientific-ish way, I understand I'm bell curve accurate, to map products into this constituent taxonomy pieces they serve, right? If it's Excel, it's a 1.1 capability. Why? Because I can track an asset from cradle to grave. I can do, and how do we get that information? We did that by analyzing every single safeguard and breaking them into those taxonomical elements and sub-elements. These are eventually going to be represented in a graph database that you can search the correlation between them and the flows between them and see them in real time. But yeah, what else would you like to know, John? Or I could go
Matt,
deep into this.
where can people get this? Because we share it with the class, we share it with the community. Where can people get this to get started? Because I agree with you. I'm going to tell people, I'm going to reiterate what he said. It looks like it's overwhelming, but this one right here, it's showing the interrelations. Don't freak out that it's a whole bunch of independent things to do, but it's showing you this kind of overlapping field of visibility on how these things support each other. But Matt, where can they get this?
So there's a PAX 8. It is registered. You have to just put your email address up for them to, know that you exist, just like you do when you download the CIS controls. But there's a link I put in the chat that y'all can go to there. It's up to date, I think, at this time to 8.1. We just did our 8.1 work and incorporated govern and some of those other aspects. But yeah, PAX 8 page. And then if you can't get through that for some reason, please reach out to me personally on LinkedIn and I'll get you another link that'll get you there. So
the other thing I would plug is Matt has like a 10-minute YouTube video that explains this very well.
Oh,
and
so
it
bad.
is not as scary as it looks. Like I saw it the first time, I'm like, peace out. But once I watched the video, I'm like, actually, this is super simple. It just looks intense.
I think we need that link. I think we need that
bad.
link as well,
I'll put it in I'll put it in the chat. It's actually literally, this happened because of Curtis, I think. I don't know if I'm going to blame Curt directly, but somewhat indirectly. I made this video explaining to Veronica, my data assistant, the way the control structure was. And the problem was she's not very technical, so she didn't understand some of the components. I kept running into having to explain, oh, DHCP, that's dynamic host control protocol, and you have to understand that it has this, like I had all that stuff. So I just made up controls on balloons. So like basically red balloons, blue balloons, loans filled with helium, you have to track them. And if some have them clowns and drains with balloons, you need to blow those up. And anyway, so I made a stupid balloon video to explain it to executives in a non-technical way. So I'll put that link in the chat as well.
We all float down here.
Really, really great stuff. Curt, from CIS's perspective, any thoughts, comments from right now?
Yeah, no, maybe two quick things. Again, thank you, Matt Lee, for putting that together. We here at the Center for Internet Security, we live and die by volunteers and folks that are just advocates for what we're our best practice guidance. And so, Matt,
understanding safeguard visual.
Matt,
I know that guy.
No,
he's talking about balloons.
Dude, he's going to
There you
talk
go.
about balloons. Yeah. Okay.
But no, I mean, Matt, putting this together and making it, very simple for folks to understand and grasp, I think it really helped us a lot. And at some point, I wouldn't mind getting it shared on our CI space as well for folks there as well for that and in that regard. And I'll just speak very briefly about Eric. I mean, Eric's journey is a fascinating journey. You don't believe into, most people don't really get security until they've been popped and then they really dig into it. And as he said, he spent several thousand hours at the beginning, but now it's down to hundreds in that. And so my only point here is that the journey isn't as long as you think it is. If you really take a prioritized, process to actually how you implement the controls and underlying safeguards in that regard. And I actually think you'll get this done more faster than you realize.
And I think that last point is really important, if I can speak, is really about why this community exists and why we're starting it and looking to expand it and bringing in all the best resources we can is to speed up time, right? If Eric, like you said, it wouldn't be 2,000 hours today. How do we, truncate that as best we can? I have one other quick comment. Hold on, let me let somebody back in. Question to you, Eric, and then maybe to you, Matt. So, Eric, what has it meant, in terms of really, business? Meaning, like, how has it changed your ability to have confidence in the sales conversation by doing this, and how, you can go toe to toe better, frame things differently? And then question to you, Matt. So Eric, that's yours. Matt, to you, like if I thought about I think it was 6.2 you showed, and it was the MFA piece. I'm just drawing up. Okay. I'd also do you think people really need to, I mean, I know how I think about it, but we talk about applications and MFA, right? I also want to think about this. What does it mean to the business, right? What revenue do those applications support? Because, Eric, and teeing it over to you, businesses typically don't do things if it's not, revenue implicated, risk implicated, right? Those are the things that typically get people to do stuff, right? And we know that because you have a client that all of a sudden finally comes to you after months, years, whatever, and they're non-regulated and they go, hey, Eric, we're finally ready to do that security program you've been telling us about, right?
Right.
And the question is, well, so what happened? What changed? Oh, well, our largest customer that constitutes 75 to 80% of our revenue put this document in front of us, said, if you don't do these things, we can't do business anymore. So if you think about it, right, we come at a lot of this time technologically and security related, but revenue and lack thereof, loss aversion is really what gets people to start noticing about security, not necessarily security unto itself. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, to answer your question, what impact does this have on business and us? So, a couple things. So, when I go and meet with a prospect, and I'm going to speak to a little more mature prospect, right? And I say, hey, I'm a CISSP. Look how special I am. And they don't care. And I talk about, hey, I was going to make the most perfect security plan in the world. And then I realized I'm not qualified to do that. And that's why we follow a framework. And my competitors, they have a dartboard with all the security products up, and they throw darts to the dartboard, and they're like, yeah, now you're secure. See, I landed on these things. I think you're secure now. And I'll say, I could sell you products based on my margin and what vendor is cool right now, or I could follow a framework and we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I'm going to follow a framework that's updated every 1 to 2 years, that's born out of blood, that is, security people agree upon something, security people, we agree on 85% and then we fight to the death on the other 15%. We have agreements that this is what should be done for companies, right? And I talked to them I talked to them about safe harbor. And if any of our clients have compliance needs, I actually require them to go to IG1 first before we address compliance. Because guess what? IG1 is going to knock out 60 to 90% of their compliance needs. And that's cybersecurity. Compliance is data privacy. And so I really try to draw hey, there's kind of a Venn diagram here, but I want to get cybersecurity for you. Then we'll work on the compliancy piece for the data privacy thing. And we're going to follow a framework, not just what I think is cool or what I get the best margins on. We're going to follow a framework together, and we're going to march together down the road here. So in full transparency, about 25% of our clients buy our IG1 offering at between $100 and $150 per user per month on top of managed services. So that's what we're doing.
what is that?
And I want to riff on that for just a second, real quick, Andrew. Two quick things. One, we've got every single time that we do this, Andrew, we have to have somebody from CIS talk about safe harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Phyllis last week was awesome, and I want Curt to talk about that here again. Number one. Number two, I am seeing a trend in the industry where I'm seeing more and more of our customers at Black Hills Information Security, they're moving away from running their own IT staff. We're talking medical institutions, credit unions, things like that. And they're moving more and more and more into the MSSP space. So if you look at this as a limiting thing that's going to limit your revenue, I think you're looking at it incorrectly. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir on this, but what is happening in the industry is the MSSP space is now in the ability to compete at larger scale customers. And the MSSP space has been building these skills. I always use the Dune analogy. It's like the Furman in Dune. You guys have been living in the desert off your own urine for centuries, and now you're ready to start competing with not necessarily other organizations, because there's not a lot of organizations that do that, but you're competing now against organizations' own internal IT staffs, and organizations are finding that it's cost effective. So you have to be ready to step up to that space, because they're already having those compliance conversations, and they've been doing compliance for years, and this prepares you. So Andrew, I'm sorry, I want to throw it back over to you, but we have to have Curt talk about lawsuits and safe harbor and all of that, because it's key.
Yeah, no doubt. Curt, before we go there, can I just finish off this question with Matt, because and the business side of things, because I think that's really, I find it's when I see the MSPs that really sell the most, highest margin, their conversations aren't so much in security and the details, the minutia, this is the risk. I'm sorry, these are the threats. Oh my gosh, this happened, that happened. It's more in, the Brian Blakely approach about talk to me about how you make money, talk to me
Yeah.
about applications and processes. That flows through to the 6.3, does it not, Matt? The why. But
Well,
yeah.
I want to, so what's 6.3 being extensible of having MFA for externally exposed applications, but back to the business part of actually truly understanding the application, what it means to the organization, how we're going to protect it and why we're going to protect it as part of that. The other thing I'll say for you is sometimes in CIS, if anybody's just getting started, it is helpful to read the whole book before starting. And here's why I say that. In this case, 6.3 is supported at the bottom by a gray or suggestive piece that says including SSO. If you read 5.6 and 6.7 that says we're going to centralize our applications to SSO, we're going to then centralize access control to the extent possible to SSO in 6.7, when you apply 6.3, you're applying it at your SSO, right? You're centralizing it. And back to your business conversation, Andrew, now I can make it easy for your employees to sign into something, have a great user experience, enhance the protection and the capabilities of visibility of their identity and where it flows. There's a business advocation. But back to your point, if you're down in the controls, usually with a customer, I think you've probably already failed. I found my most success by just telling them I'm the doctor. And I'll also riff on this that we're in an industry where no other industry do I have to prove to you that I understand what your flux capacitor does before we can start work, right? If my attorney sits down and goes, let me explain to you Anglican law structure. And also you need to know a little bit about Napoleonic code to understand the difference. And let me talk to you about, no, we get too in the weeds. I think we should talk about business outcomes. I can make it easy to use your applications, get to them quick and protect them, right? Like, anyway, sorry. I got John
I'm
about
to disagree and I'm going to agree.
okay. I'm good with that, John. I love it. Go.
So I'm going to agree 110% with a lot of the traditional customer base that MSPs are working with, but the customer groups that you guys are now stepping up into, you better be ready to get into Anglican law. Because when you start stepping up into that space, the CIOs, the CSOs, absolutely 100%. And I know that that's a distinction, and I know that's not exactly what you said, but you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared if they
that's
want
Curtis.
to talk.
Yeah. This brings you to Curt's point. I was making a joke about my attorney and my CPA. Don't make me understand the rules of AICPA before going down and billing me $350 an hour. But to the point, Curt, you've talked about this before, and maybe we'll just kick it back to that point of, you think about Ohio in 2018, I think passed their first Safe Harbor Act that's based on reasonableness of meeting a safeguard at the time of the breach, right? That's the kind of piece. Do you want to, Andrew, am I taking it in the wrong direction to kick that back to Curtis? Okay.
That's absolutely perfect. And
No, it's a perfect segue, and thank you, Matt, and thank you, John, both. Yeah, I mean, so why did we at the Center for Internet Security start talking about defining reasonable cybersecurity? It wasn't like it was a brilliant idea that we thought of. No, it actually, it as Matt points out, it started with an Ohio statute in 2018. They were looking for a way to, if you will, push good cyber hygiene, good cyber practices within the state. And so they basically said, hey, we're going to have a protection law here. And if you actually implement one of several frameworks, so it doesn't have to be the CIS critical security controls, it could be the NIST cybersecurity framework or ISO 27001, but they listed a number of frameworks. And the other thing that was really important with that in the statute is that they didn't try to write down what the requirements were. They knew that there was already subject matter expertise out there. Let's just acknowledge that and build that into the statute. But what they did though is they said if you actually implement one of those frameworks, then we're going to create a safe harbor for you, and we're going to, if you will, immunize you and from lawsuit, for that. But you have to be, of course, a business within that state. The good news is there's now 5 states that have done that, right? So, started with Ohio and Iowa and Utah. Basically, it's the exact same language in their statutes. Connecticut's slightly different. They don't. I'm losing the right term, but basically they don't immunize you against lawsuit. They limit the liability.
Yeah, a high watermark cap that you can suffer from, right?
And then Nevada's the 5th, and they basically have done it just for this, just for state departments and agencies. They have a 2-year legislative cycle. And so the belief is that they're going to then follow through with the other part of this with Nevada. But that's why we created the guide to defining reasonable cybersecurity. And so basically we want to say, hey, here's how you actually go about implementing it. Yes, we did it for the controls, but it doesn't mean that someone couldn't do it for another framework if they choose to do it. We just didn't do, we left that as homework for someone else to do. In that regard.
I want to add one more thing about Anglican law and the impact of this and frameworks and reasonableness, back to John's point. If you're not familiar, the Department of Justice in 2021 in October started the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative. It was the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative. And in that, they were using an 1863 law, still are, called Lincoln's Law, that speaks towards the False Claims Act and any contracts with the government, saying, hey, remember when you said you had reasonable cybersecurity in place at the time? We're going to test that theory, right? And it really is an attack on, show me your reasonableness. Help me show the defensibility that says you were doing these things. And if not, we can sue you up to the entire contract. And it's a whistleblower clause, meaning if John Strand just gets mad and goes, I'm telling on you, he can get his 33% as a result of that and have some of the protections of federal government for him. So
it sounds a lot like what they're finally validating with the DIB, Matt. The defense.
A little bit different, but same. Just
Yeah,
John, it seems like I might have cut you off there. Sorry.
Nope.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing about this, and this is something I'm struggling with, right? You know, we're supposed to come to these things and be experts. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in this too, like we're talking about, you know, multi-factor authentication, and I cannot stress how important that is. But the idea of the CIS is it's something that is kind of a living, breathing document, and the fact that it does change, does get updated. And kind of an example of one of the things that I want to eventually discuss with you, because I haven't figured this out on my own, is BHIS. We're bypassing MFA weekly now.
Yep.
And we got hit at Black Hills Information Security where an attacker was able to gain access to one of our admins, not an administrator, but just somebody.
Yes.
Executive assistants. They nailed one of her accounts, and we were able to catch it in an hour. And it took that long because that's how long it took for the logs to come off the cloud service to get to us. So there's things whenever we're looking at this, like this has got to evolve, right? And I think that one of the concerns that I have is we talk about doing these due diligence things, and you're seeing this huge spread in the industry to where people are implementing some type of control framework, whether it's CIS or something else, and they're literally dealing with threat actors that are 5-6 years ago. And one of the things we desperately want to do is how do we bring this to where it's more up to date? Because I have some recommendations for you all that none of you are going to like to stop the attacks that we are doing. And it's one of those things where it has to continue to grow and it has to continue to be alive for us to be able to deal with these active attacks as they are progressing. Because if you go back a couple of years ago, we didn't have the tool sets that we have today for bypassing things like MFA. So it'd be like the next one that Andrew and I are going to be doing in a couple of weeks, you really need to come because I'm going to be talking about what that attack looks like, how that works, and how we can take this definition of, what is it, 6.3, I think is the one with MFA, Matt, if you can correct me if I'm wrong.
6.3, 6.4, 6.5, not to get specific.
That group, and how implementing it is different now to be successful than what it was maybe a year ago, and how we have to be forward leaning on some of these things. Go ahead, Matt.
And how the controls don't stop. Like that's a guidance. It says implement MFA. It doesn't say know which type and which ones get beat to death. And like there is an aspect of being a practitioner, John, that has to come into this, that has to say, yes, these are guidelines, but yeah, Eric has to stay on top of these modalities and methodologies and ensure that he's updating his 4.1 to make sure that his MFA for 6.3 is done the right way. What is that? Like FIDO, which is phishing resistant. I can't necessarily do it with an AITM of Evilgenix or something like that, right? So it's those kind of things that's where the practitioner never stops. And what we did with CompTIA Trustmark or GTI Trustmark, and also even my interpretation of the CIS safeguards is you're always going to be improving them. You should always be reassessing and go, let's take a look at 6.3 and see if anything's changed in the threat landscape, if we need to change the way we're implementing our 6.3, right? And improve it. And if you're doing this, in my opinion, right, you will always have improvements every year. Changes, delta, update, process delineations, tool delineations.
100%, 100%.
Well, Matt, let's look at it from the threat actor perspective. They're certainly improving their tooling every year and their methodology
Every week.
Right.
Yeah.
But to your point, let's just pick on John MFA for a minute and Matt and gosh, I got Enrique out here who, we talk about this every single week, right? We finally have started to see MFA get rolled out. Thank goodness, right? In a more meaningful way. We've seen, not perfect by any means, but statistically, right, we're starting to see MFA go up in terms of its proliferation in our customers. Well, what has the threat actor done, right? They've created numerous types of social engineering to create token hijacking and man ATIM, man in the middle attacks. Fair, John, and fair, Matt? We're seeing.
Absolutely. And I just shared a link to a webcast we did last week that was talking about how organizations can test this. This isn't something that anyone should be jumping out and trying to do or implementing anything, but to get your headspace, like what you were talking about, Andrew, and exactly what Matt was talking about. You never are compliant and that's it. You walk away like Hollywood style explosion, right? It's this constant evolution that you have to keep up to date on it. So I just put in a webcast that we did last week talking about how you can test adversary in the middle without having any hacking tools in your organization to kind of get prepped, because in the next week, I'm going to be talking about some possible ways that we are implementing, because we know that we are being targeted by the Russians. The FBI has contacted us directly and let us know that this is something that's coming at BHIS. Good luck, have fun. And I'm going to be sharing the next session, what we are implementing at BHIS and how effective it was for us. Because if you can't implement it for all of your customers, I'm going to give you guys some recommendations to protect your own assets. But we have that definitely don't go to. But yeah, I gave you a teaser. That is a full webcast, and we'll be talking about some protections in the next session.
Why don't we take a quick pause? Anybody have questions? Come off mute. Anything that has sparked interest so far that you, or something you want to share with the group?
I'll just jump in real quick with a question harkening back to something that Matt said about, take the time to read the whole book before you start implementing kind of at the beginning. And, being in the course where I've got, controls 1 through 16, and I got into 1, and I was like, boy, inventory. Yeah, what are we going to do with the tools that we have that will cover percentages? Is it worth? Maybe it's a poor question, and it depends on how well you learn and things like that. But is it worth kind of walking through the whole course and going through the videos and all of the interviews, and then taking the time to go back and go, all right, how can I implement number 1? How can I implement number 2? So does that make sense?
It does. A couple of quick things. Like the initial videos that I did were very, very short videos as a description. Then we're doing videos with the interviews that I think is where the true value is. At that particular point, you can spin off to any of the other classes that I have there. There's over 60 some hours of content. But the other thing that you can do is just hit me up via an email and say, here's kind of my problem statement. What do you recommend? Because when you gain access to the subscription in this class, it's not just an issue of here's my videos, leave me alone. You actually have access to, like Andrew and myself, where we can sit and we can try to answer questions. And sometimes it'll be, go check out this video. It'll help you get set up. Go to this lab. It'll help you get set up. But you kind of have that expert buddy network as part of the subscription that you can ask some of these questions to try to avoid banging your head against a wall constantly. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, it's a great question, Clint, and let me ask it to like Eric. Eric, you're starting all over knowing what you know now.
I would, yeah. Knowing what go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me finish the question, but would you want to hear how you'd approach it, but would you 100% yes or no start on your MSP before you start even thinking about customers?
Absolutely. No hesitation. Start with your own MSP.
Eat your dog food.
Yep. And I would recommend going to implementation group 2. Go get one nailed first. But to answer your question, like, should I go through all the content before I start one? I'd almost do it in parallel. I would be starting one and delegating to your team and setting expectations and start that process as you keep progressing. Because you're not going to be able to do this by yourself. You need to designate, you need to, bring in your team, set what does good look like? Well, what does okay look like? And then what does good look like? Get some of those wheels in motion as you keep progressing. Because if you wait till you're all the way done, I know what it's like to be in the MSP world. Like there's never a moment to yourself, or there's never free time. If you wait till it's all done, it's just kicking that can further and further down the road, and it still feels like that mountain you still have to climb. So I would, start chipping away at hardware inventory as you're kind of keep through the training. Then software inventory is actually easier than hardware inventory, in my opinion. And then when you get to data, don't give up. Like once you get through data, just know that once you get past 6, it gets so much easier.
Yeah, it does.
MSP, right? But those first 3 are bare. 3 is a real bugger. 4, 5, and 6 are not simple with MSP tools in the current state. But once you hit 7, you're gonna be like, I got this, So that's how I would attack it at this point.
And when you start, kind of springboard off of what Eric just said, when you start, you're going to feel behind.
Yeah.
Embrace that feeling because it will never go away.
Amen. Yeah. I'll add to this. No, go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
I was going to say better to feel that way than the alternative.
It
right,
is.
John? Doing
Overconfidence is a killer.
Oh man, it'll kill you dead. I would add to this is like, you're going to implement stuff that is not your standard. And if you let perfection be the enemy of good, you won't implement. I would start with what you can. And I'll give you a great example. If you look at 1.1, 1.1 gives you a lot of examples of asset types, and it's even further refined in CIS 8.1. But in 1.1, you might be able to easily get all of your devices and endpoints that touch data. You might be able to easily get all of your mobile phones that touch data. You might be able to easily get those. Get that and come back for IoT, come back for active scanning, come back for passive scanning, come add those pieces as you go and improve your controls over time. And the other thing I'll add is when you think of what is 1.1, 1.1 says an asset is anything that can store or process data, which means as you move into 2 and you find new software, it's processing data. That means any assets that are in that software are probably storing or processing data as an extensibility of that. And so you'll go back and refine 1.1 and get better at it as you find things. And then as Eric said, when you get into 3 better help you find where your software is, and refine 2 that you now know, oh gosh, I have this data here. I hadn't defined that as software. It's a SaaS bucket. I need to make sure that's considered. And we think about that front end of that, right? And so when you start thinking about this, these controls are built this way to walk you through them in that order. And I do like what you're saying. Bless you. Twice. I think I have 3 in me, John. But those are meant to be in an order, and they will build upon each other. And then as you go back and do IG2s, you'll see how much better you can be at IG1. So to John's point, feel like you're behind, you always will be. It's just a part we've ignored as a general industry for too long. All right. Sorry, John, go. I'll get off my soapbox.
Eric. Andrew's got something.
Yeah. So Ed, you have a question. I'm coming to you. One more thing to you, Eric, and John comment on this. So Eric, again, knowing what you know now, you're deep into the controls. They've been rolled out. Let's just say arguably the top 2 attack types are, social engineering, right? We're seeing, again, everything, attacking M365, right? Passwords, MFA, right? On and on and on. Folks like John Strand setting up Teams environments to attack you. But seriously, we know that M365 is the target rich environment and then internet facing devices, VPNs, right? By and large, we can flip a coin, probably much more heavily weighted to M365 but we're seeing VPNs and internet facing devices get whacked left, right, and center. Would that change your prioritization in terms of how you would look at the controls if you were starting day 1 today to go, because Phyllis talks about, someone would go, I'm on 1, I'm done 1.1, 1.2. And she's like, yeah, but what about backup? What about this? What about this? What about this? So,
yeah, I mean, so that's a tricky question, right? So there's the priority that CIS is built in. That's the kind of part of the magic, right? Why would we go have a pen test done if we don't even know where our inventory is at? So there is magic in the order of things.
I will answer that question.
I knew this was going to trigger John.
We will find it for you. Sorry.
Yeah, right. So if I was to save a few hundred hours of mistakes, it was the earlier comment of trying to get perfection, like 1.1, we're going to nail it. We actually finally said, you know what, we're going to do everything but mobile. Mobile, we're going to put a pin in and we're going to come back around. When we come around to the second review of CIS IG1, because mobile, it's like if we don't have MDM and then we're in the MAM and oh, should we do MAM or should we do MDM? And then we're down all these rabbit holes, right? So we made some conscious decisions and we put it right in our MSA to our SOW to our client is like MDM is excluded from this unless you buy an MDM product, right? Or something like that. So we kind of scoped ourselves out, and I know that's taken a little bit of liberty to it, but like in the big picture, I'd rather get through the other 18 and come back and then hit mobile on round 2 than try to get mobile perfect while I'm ignoring MFA and security awareness training and all these things. And so we kind of went for, at the first round, we went for perfect and we ate up so many hours and we were so slow. The second round, we're like, you know what? Let's go for good in all 18 and then come back around and let's go for a little bit better. And then let's go for a little bit better, right?
And I also think each of those rounds, you look for the quick wins, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the Dave Ramsey, the debt snowball, right? Like pay off the little things and get some wins or whatever, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm not suggesting you should ignore things, but we purposely and thoughtfully went MDM is going to be out of scope on the first pass.
Can I jump in real quick? So when we talk about reasonableness, and let's go back to this Anglican law piece that John started us down. Is it reasonable you're just going to be done all of a sudden? I know I'm calling it yours. So is it reasonable that you're absolutely going to get it done in a second, or no? It's going to take a project, right? And it's going to take work and hours and time. Why not document the journey and show me that you're aware of your gaps? I know we can't do MAM, MDM. We will do that in our that's a POAM. You're now describing a plan of action and milestones and the next steps. And to John's point, to being aware of those next wins, to being aware of that next pass as you go through. And if you want to talk about showing reasonableness, go show people that on a jury of here's the 75 things we accomplished this quarter with the 4 resources we had. Here's the next 35 we had planned out that we're doing next. And here's all the details about them. Like, is that not reasonable? What is reasonableness? It's being able to say we played the game well in my Kobayashi Maru. I'm going to lose. Did you do well, Captain? Right? Is kind of the conversation.
Hundreds of hours were lost.
I feel like that's
trying to be
that's
perfect.
Great feedback, because being the perfectionist, like I want to go in and get it nailed down, but I realize that we can't do that. And so going after and being good at all of those things, and just it's really good to hear all of you say that, because that's what I've had to accept is reality, and that is the path that we must tread.
And like I said, with this class and the subscription, I am the king of lazy quick wins. Like, you can go through and there's so many things that you are already doing that I can say you can take this and that can be your lazy basis for inventory for software, your basis for inventory of hardware, right? Get it into some type of, I don't care if it's a spreadsheet. I don't care. Just get it in somewhere. And then you can circle back around it. So, and that's part of what we're doing here in this course, right? Is getting you to be able to ask those questions, because like Matt was saying, we've talked to people kind of like what Eric was at in that first round, where they're like, oh my God, we're afraid that this weird edge case will come in. And it's like, no, time out. Let's do the center mass game, pedo principle, 80-20.
So Eric, you mentioned something I think is really important for them to hear. It's in the course. But you mentioned, hey, MDM, not part of it. Can you talk about a quick win? Maybe it wasn't quick, but shared responsibility, because I think this is something that could be a quick win in the sense of, hey, this is something I can't even do. So why am I gonna, potentially put my MSP at risk? And let's call that out sooner than later.
Yeah, so man, let me just give you the list of all my mistakes here. So another huge mistake we made was we thought we had to do it all as the MSP. We don't want to bother our clients with this stuff, right? We have to do it all. And we started trying to help with data inventory. I can't tell you what P&L is important and which one is a hypothetical test company. I can't tell them what data is important. That is their responsibility. Now I can help nag them or make them aware. So what we did is IG1 is 56 controls. We assigned who is the majority owner of that particular safeguard. And we identified 40 were the MSP and 16 were the clients. And then in our GRC or assessment tool, we actually tagged it, client responsibility, MSP responsibility. or we did a few were shared. And I can run a report and I can show the 40 that we have and the 40 where we're at with our 40. And then I can show them their 16 and where they're at with their 16. Now, at the end of the day, I want them to do all 56. But you know what I care about the most is my 40, because that's what I put in my scope of work that I'm going to deliver, right? And so if I can show progress, and the other thing, you got to show where they're at. It's gap assessment, right? Where are you at when you started? Where are you at in quarter 1? Where are you at in quarter 2? Show progress, right? But if I can show my 40, guess what? When it hits the fan, and if we're in court, I can show, look, I made this really clear that this was your responsibility, and I'm super sorry you didn't do that, but we did our 40, right? And so it told CYA.
And also the other granularity of that. Think about patching, Andrew. Can I patch completely without somebody else's help, or do they have to maybe leave the machines online, pay for their SmartNet subscription, actually do the... So there's a shared responsibility in almost every safeguard, if we're really honest about it. It's really, where do we draw those lines? How much can I do for you? How much do you have to do? And so that's a great example, like patching. You can show, to Eric's point, hey, I patched 100% of the 4 machines you left online. Wonderful.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and you failed on leaving them online. So we got a D here overall. I just want you to know.
And so to that point, Matt, I got to have documentation that we've asked them to turn these machines on, right? I cannot go force them to turn it on. Like, it's just a reality. We've done some things to, you know, if I haven't seen it in 2 weeks, it acts the user, then the manager. So we've done some things that way, but at the end of the day, they got to turn it on. And if they don't care enough to turn it on, I don't know if I care enough to get it patched. I mean, you know, be careful there, but.
Yeah, so Curt, you put something in chat. You want to kind of expand on that?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what Matt was saying earlier about, you know, this reasonableness, or when are you done with it? And the point is, you know, reasonableness, you know, is only a court can decide, you know, did you exhibit that standard of reasonableness? And so what they're really looking for is evidence, artifacts that you actually, you know, have a plan in place and you're actually working diligently towards it, you know, things that you've already knocked off and, you know, shared responsibility in that. That's when the judge or jury will look at it and say, yeah, what that organization was doing was actually reasonable in their implementation of their cybersecurity program. And so I think that's where, you know, we're getting to, certainly in this, you know, this litigious country. You know, I really think that it's only going to get more litigious. I mean, every year there's more and more cases at both the state and federal level that they're using the terms like lack of reasonableness in their implementation. So I think that's very important for everyone to make sure that they understand that as they're implementing their program.
And I got one last thing to kind of springboard off of that, because I think it's really critical. Being an offensive threat actor and doing lots and lots and lots of assessments, the organizations that we're successfully breaking into are not the organizations that are implementing these controls. They're not the ones that are thinking them through. They're not the ones that are constantly in a state of feeling like we're behind. If I talk to a customer and they're like, no, we got this. You guys ain't getting in. We feel really strong about our security. We know it's going to be a nightmare. If we go into a customer and they're like, oh, we're trying to implement these controls and I don't know, we're kind of going through it. We're doing the best we can, guys. We're really, really trying. Usually those organizations are exponentially more difficult. So this is one of those stitch and time saves 9 things. Trust me, as somebody that does offensive attacks, these make a difference. Sure, I can bypass MFA, but if I get on an organization and they have good cloud logging and alerting, they're going to catch me fairly quickly, right? I can bypass any control, any technical thing that is out there. I cannot bypass them all implemented and orchestrated correctly. So please keep that in mind as you're doing this. Don't get frustrated, because it does make a huge difference in the end game.
Right, John, just to pick up on that real quick. I mean, you're absolutely excellent point. And that is that, you know, we're incurring a cost to the adversary to attack, right? So
Yes.
at some point you'll get through, got it, check. But you may say, you know, it's not worth it to me, you know, to spend all this time and effort to attack. I'm moving over to someone that's a little, you know, not as the program is not as sufficient as it should be.
I want to springboard on that, and then we got to get to Ed's question, or he's going to stab us in the heart. But, you know, John, you talked about this, and maybe I'm going to be antithesis here, but I don't think you can be a good defender if you don't learn some offense. I really
I
believe
agree.
if you don't understand those tools, you won't really understand the context in which you're trying to apply these safeguards and controls. That's my personal belief. And
Agreed.
you have a class that comes with this that's part of anti-siphon range, right, John, to let people go
Well,
learn?
two things. One, bundled with this has the entire intro to pen testing class. Because I know that this sounds horrible. My goal in life is to make my life more difficult.
Amen.
And I am literally inviting all of you to learn how to do a pen testing company like I did at Black Hills Information Security. And the cyber range has offensive skills. I've got offensive tools to teach defense in all the labs. Exactly like Matt said, you got to learn offense to understand defense. You got to understand defense to be good at offense. So come join us. Like, that's really what I want. I want more good, small boutique firms doing quality work.
I was just going to say, to sum this up, it's like, if you ever started something like a jujitsu or CrossFit, the first time you go there and, this is going back to your question, Clint, it's like, it's intimidating as hell. There's so much to learn. It's, you see other people, like you see a John Strand, who's a 7th degree black belt. You see a Matt Lee, a 3rd degree black belt, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, gosh, man, that's how am I ever going to do it? Well, but you start going, right?
You know how Matt and I got there? We got our asses kicked again and again and again and again. And
Right?
embrace the suck.
Yeah, and that's just it, really.
Accurate.
Yeah, right. It's so just think about it that way, right? From a sports perspective, if you ever done that or learn an instrument, any type of skill, it's intimidating when you first walk in but look at where you're now. Look at the fact that you have an IT business, an MSP, the first time you did it, right? And now look at where you are. It's the same thing. So, Matt, I'm sorry, John, do we have time for any lab today?
I don't have any labs today. I'm currently rebuilding the entire Kali instance and redoing the cyber deception modules. And I don't know if any of you are interested, but next week I am teaching Intro to Cyber Deception as a pay what you can class. And I'm going to tell you guys, like, it may not be in the controls yet, Curt, but cyber deception should be in here. It absolutely should be in here because it works really well. And my class is set up for that all next week. And I've got some new labs for that. But really what I'm working on is what I shared with you all, that link. And I can't wait to tell you what BHIS is going to do to try to deal with the threat actors that are coming after us, and how we're kind of augmenting our security stack to deal with that. But stick with me. That's going to be in 2 weeks. I'll be covering that.
Yeah, very cool. John, what is your quote? Was it Chris Krebs or somebody that had kind of dissed cyber deception, and you're like, but you're wrong.
Oh no, that's Bruce Schneier. Or maybe it was Jeff Moss. I can't remember. It's one of them. But it was basically like, no, it's Bruce Schneier. Security through obscurity is no security at all, is what Bruce Schneier said. And I said, Schneier is wrong. Security through obscurity freaking rocks if you do it correctly. And that's what I teach next week. And by the way, Bruce hates the fact that I say that. Just as a heads up. So
I'll tell you where I stand on this. Come visit me in Provo, right? Like, yeah. So.
Gosh, I went there twice. You never answered your door.
Why am I always here? Matt's always in Provo, and it's always John Strand's birthday. But I do have to get going. I'm late for another meeting. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody. And I truly mean that. As you're going through the class, just hit me up, and you're like, dude, there's 60 some hours here. Can you point me in the right direction? And we can definitely do that. Take care, everybody.
John, thanks. Eric, Matt, Curt, really appreciate all y'all joining us today. We'll come back in a few weeks. And until then, like I said, reach out to us and stay safe, stay awesome. Take care.
Hey, chomp, chomp, my friend. Chomp, chomp.
Oh, he's not going to like that.